Over the last while, we have seen a massive resurgence in classic horror-style games, with the recent success of the popular Hollow Body game that came out, that uses a very distinctive classic survival horror style, but that also bases it more around the 6th generation of consoles, more likely with the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. I have done a previous video on that, so I'll leave a link in the description. But there are many other interesting games that are starting to pop up, both on itch.io and even now demos on Steam, that cover a lot of different aspects of classic horror that will definitely appeal to fans. And truthfully, there is more of these games that do need to see the light of day, because this style, not only does it invoke nostalgia, but they're being developed in a way that will make them appealing to more modern and new fans alike. So they are definitely worth exploring, that's for sure. And one of the games here, under the name of Becrowned, which has just only recently released a demo on Steam, is another interesting title to look at, as it too also uses graphics very similar from the PS1, almost early PS2 era, to invoke a sense of tension and fear, a very dark, dimly lit environments, with the demo starting off in an asylum. And it's hard to really know regarding the story due to the protagonist that you're playing as. You don't know whether the story or the environments that you're in are based off of the real world or they're a fictional element made up in his own mind. As from the premise, you get the impression that he suffers with a lot of mental health problems and that everything is all in his head, but you'll uncover elements of the story the further into the demo that you get. Now, you do have the ability to play with different control types, both modern controls and tank controls, very similar to classic survival horror games. And it does use a fixed camera, almost dynamic camera perspective, which is good, but with the modern controls it can be a little bit fiddly. I always find that with these type of games. It does take a bit of getting used to. Now, there are elements in terms of the combat and a few other features that does seem to be a little bit cumbersome and fiddly, but I'm sure that a lot of this stuff will be fleshed out when the game is fully released. So the demo itself sees you starting off in an insane asylum, and there's not really much going on other that it is definitely filled with dark and really tense atmosphere. You know that something's gone on here, but it isn't too long before you start to meet some of the unruly inhabitants. Now, with the combat, the controls, like I said, are fiddly, but you can deal with some of the slower enemies. Even with a basic knife, you can take them out fairly handy. But later on, when you gain access to a gun, you will need it, because you'll end up dealing with rooms filled with even more monsters all at the same time. So you'll have to choose your battles wisely, because even though you can pick up health items, you will die very, very quickly, especially with some of the stronger enemies that can shoot projectiles at you. Like 1 to 2 hits and you will be dead. Simple as that. So you'll always have to mind your surroundings. And the modern controls, and even with some of the camera angles, can make it fiddly to try and run past enemies, because you can get stuck trying to know where you are. So that can also cause confusion. But from the time spent playing it, all I can see and what it reminds me of straight away is very Silent Hill, but also even Outlast, if you've ever played that from the way back in the PS4. It definitely has vibes from both of those games, and it does do a good job of it. There's a really good level of tension here that is worth exploring for sure. If anything what these games are getting right that are popping up is the atmosphere. They're very dark, very dingy. They just have a very interesting allure and creepiness to them that just keeps you on edge the whole time, and that's something you want from these titles. And if you've played the recent Hollow Body, you can understand that. That was a really, really good title that was worth trying, and a really good throwback to classic survival horror, and I genuinely think that Becrowned is going to do the same. But yes, a lot of these games, they're not as well fleshed out as they could be, and again, because they're in early development, hopefully that things will be ironed out. But it's still a really good vision into what can be and what is possible, and the fact is that these games and this style still works even to the current day. Hollow Body proved that previously, as the graphics are more of the 6th gen of consoles with the likes of the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, but it was so dark, gritty and grim that the atmosphere just was so present that you couldn't avoid it, and it did it really well. And you do get those vibes here with Becrowned, so yeah, I definitely think it's something worth looking out for. But if you do want to try it out, there'll be a link to the demo in the description. Definitely go and have a look. I'm sure you've probably seen a few other videos floating around on YouTube of gameplay and elements elements around it. Yeah, it is interesting, challenging at times, especially with the puzzles. Some of the puzzles can be a bit tricky to figure out, and a lot of these games don't always give you the apparent elements of what to do next, but with a little bit of help and a little bit of luck, you'll find your way. But with that being said, this is just but one of many interesting horror games that are starting to pop up over recent times, and there is a lot more that we do need to look at and discover, which this next video will cover, so you might want to check it out.